Welcome back to Magnetic. Today's guest is a master of brand storytelling, someone who brings both soul and structure to the creative process. Dan Gladden is the executive creative director at Interact Studios, where he helps build and elevate some of the most compelling consumer brands in the game. From early stage startups to household names, Dan has a sharp eye for identity and an unmatched ability to translate brand values into design, voice, and experience. He's a cultural thinker with a strategist's brain and a creative's heart, known for crafting brands that don't just show up on shelves but actually resonate. In this episode, we get into what makes a brand magnetic in today's saturated world, how to uncover the core of a brand's story, and why the best creative work starts with clarity, courage, and conviction. Dan Gladden, welcome to Magnetic. Let's get into it. But Dan, I appreciate you being here. I'd love to start with probably a stupider question on my part
Okay.
because I was just thinking about this before you got here, because you are the executive creative director of Interact, which is one of our favorite branding agencies. Incredible business that you and Blake are running. But even just the term creative director.
Yeah.
So I don't come from your world,
Mhm.
but I was laughing about this with my wife the other day when she was like talking about, oh, look, this fashion house got a new creative director. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And I was just said it. I'm like, wait, I don't even know what the fuck that means. Like,
Yeah.
what is
Uh,
creative direction to me is vague
yeah.
because I just don't know where that sits and what that entertains and what that looks like, but
Yeah.
it's one of those words that's always just existed in my ether, like, "Oh, that's the creative director of XYZ."
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? Like, what
Uh,
does that really
I
entail?
think you start off with a vision because being a creative it kind of can change, right? If you're a creative director for a brand,
Mm,
it's different than being a creative director for a creative agency because you have lots of different brands,
yeah,
right? So say to your point, if I'm creative director of Louis Vuitton,
yes,
I'm
yeah.
working just on Louis Vuitton, and then I create a vision for Louis Vuitton, and then that vision is followed. And as a creative director, I'm there to direct and make sure that vision is upheld, and push it, and question it, and drive it.
When you say vision, what is that? Double click on that
Yeah,
because, in my again, just naive here, but it's like, "Oh, well, we're gonna look like this year, and this is, like, oh, what our lines are gonna look
it's
like." What
the
is
approach to how we solve problems, right? So as
interesting.
we've talking about earlier on, the way that I was taught how to solve problems and be creative and come up with ideas is my vision for how I am with Blake and the team in driving the work that we're doing within the studio. So it's a lot of, hey guys, we need to step back. We need to think about the problem. Like a lot of the stuff we talk about at Interact is the stuff that we create isn't just desirable, it's actually effective. There's a lot
Mm,
of desirable brands out there or agencies out there that can create lovely looking work, right? But at the end of the day, we're solving a business problem for our clients, and that is they need to sell the product that they're doing. So, why I'm saying that and why is that relevant to a creative director is to be able to create something that's effective, it needs to have a purpose and good foundations behind it. And it needs to come from a point, a heart, an idea, or whatever that might be. And then if you activate that and you push that, then the work comes from that, the creative comes from that, and that's my vision in a way of the philosophy and the approach to problem
mm,
solving is what I continuously every day work with the team on and push them on.
yeah,
So it
really,
it
really interesting.
it delivers strong work, and you see it, right? If I mentioned this to you earlier on this morning, but like if you've got an idea, you can bring that to life visually in lots of different ways. But if you don't have an idea, then you just have something that looks good, and does
Yeah,
that stay the test of time? And does that, build relevancy? Does that build brand love? Does that build a connection? Does that solve a problem?
yeah,
So, like, the the creative director role or executive creative director role is very much around not only guiding your team or shaping the team on your vision and your
mhm,
approach to what you feel is the right way to solve problems, but it's also with the clients as well. Education is massive. Like, right, twofold, for example. I deal with either massive global brands or new to world founder led brands. Now, I approach those two scenarios different because you've got, say, Mondelez and Oreo on the left hand side, which are global brands. they have big marketing teams that have gone to school, they know about
Yeah,
marketing, they've probably traveled around to other different big organizations, the Kellogg's, all this of the world. So their education is less of how do you create a brand, and it's more of getting them excited or reinventing the brand
yeah,
that they have
evolving it.
today.
Yeah,
Whereas then on the other side, you've got new to world founder led brands. They've never done this before. A lot of the time, it's like, hey, I've got a really good idea for a product, i.e., a candy or whatever. They don't know anything about branding. That's why they come to us. But that education and that relationship is different. Not that they both aren't getting the same out
yeah.
of it, but you just have to like hold a conversation. And really, it's about being a thought leader, right? A creative thought leader for
Mm,
these two different clients. I always say I don't like operating in a transactional behavior in the way of here's a brief, so do the project we're asking you to do. Thank you very much. See you later.
yeah,
Right? It's really about building a relationship and honestly, like, there's a little bit of, um, like, you kind of invest in it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you
mhm,
actually if you like, I was
and
work
emotionally.
yeah, I
Yeah,
was working on before I joined Interact, I was working on, a global redesign project, right, a previous agency. It was 3 years, and it still isn't done.
yeah.
Do
What's
and
for a major is it more of a conglomerate,
yeah,
major company?
it's I probably can't say what it is because
Yeah,
it's not out yet, but it's
yeah,
a very big global brand that everyone knows. It's a confectionery brand, but because of the size and the scale and the global reach of this brand, the amount of testing, consumer testing, the amount of hierarchical decisions within the organization, it takes time. And you kind of sometimes you take two step forwards and then it's three back or one back, and then you feel you're in a good place, the whole team feels they're in a good place, you put it in front of consumers, and actually, hang on, it's not resonating what everyone expects. It still could be the right thing to do, but,
yeah,
that we say Interact, test to learn, not to win, which is a great thing, and the way that we kind of bring in, consumer research or testing is earlier on in the project, where we're kind of maybe in round 1 creative, and we test, and we learn from it,
yeah,
we refine, and we grow, we grow and develop the work from it, whereas sometimes if you test, like, big consumers, you're just looking for numbers, right? And you're less looking of actually what is working here? What is working here and what isn't working here? How can we make it stronger? So like you know, I've kind of sideballed a little bit, but like as
yeah.
a
No,
as a as a creative director or a creative thought leader, it's really about almost kind of shepherding and leading and showing the way to some extent of not only as I say for my team internally in the studio, but for our clients as well.
yeah, and it's so interesting that you've worked on both sides because it is starkly different. And I know you just
Yeah,
briefly mentioned that, but can we double click on? You use the example of Oreo. Is
yeah,
that one that's there's an
yeah.
anecdote behind that that you could share?
Yeah, so I mean, I had the privilege of working like it's an awesome brand, right?
Yeah,
And I had many different projects underneath that brand. But being a global brand, the brand is perceived differently in different countries, right? So globally, if we're doing something like like we've done like an IMC, for example, which is an integrated marketing campaign. The last one I did before I moved here was for Oreo and Coca-Cola collab. Awesome, right? It's this kind of like, wow, this is an unbelievable opportunity. You've got two iconic brands and they want to do a collab. Now I have to go away and come up with the visual identity for this. Pretty cool. The level of that is like Oreo is at different levels of growth market in different countries. So actually Oreo is still pretty new in Europe. Right here it's fundamentally what 100 years old, 110 I think it was because we did a
mm,
110 year anniversary activation as well.
wow,
But like so there's things that you can have more more flexibility, shall I say, in the US than you can in Europe or in China or wherever. And that's where they look to activate those brands. And the reason Coca-Cola came to Oreo is because Oreo is very culturally relevant. Like they're very good at how they activate and talk to brand. And Coca-Cola probably a little bit threatened by Pepsi, this kind of stuff. They're like, are we really still cool or like kind
Mhm.
of relevant? And they actually probably approached Oreo and said, "Hey, let's do something because, you're, hitting the cultural
Yeah.
relevancy."
It's kinda like what Nike did with,
Yeah.
Skims
Yeah,
recently, right?
exactly. You kind of, I mean, Nike's a great brand. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I talk about is creating distinctive brand assets, right? And that's very much of whether that's creating a brand or whether that's a brand like Oreo or like Pringles, for example, which is another brand, the redesigned Pringles I did, right? You look at what makes this distinctive, but also what makes this relevant and also the memory structure from it
Mhm.
as well, right? So on the big side, you've got Pringles redesign and you've got a character, Mr. P,
Yeah.
right? Absolute legend, but lost his way over the years, pretty iconic, right? So you kind of through consumer
Yeah.
recognition, all that kind of stuff, that the mustache, the bow tie, pretty familiar with Pringles. Everyone's drawing it when you ask them to draw it. So that big job was just kind of evolving and making that a stronger asset that then can be activated in a real relevant and timeless manner. So like we gave personality to Mr. P, right? He
Mhm.
on sour cream, his eyes squint, because it's sour versus on spicy, there's like fire. Like, do you know what I mean? It's just a
Yeah.
little bit of that wink and that nod, but it just
Yeah.
builds a bit of that lovely emotional
And that's why
connection.
it's so funny because you see the feedback to redesigns of major brands, and you'll see people break them down like, "This is barely different." They changed like Walmart did one
Mm,
recently, where it was literally like thicker font or whatever, or
yeah.
less thick font. But I don't think people realize like you can't just take away an iconic brand and like completely, I don't know. I should be asking you, can
Well,
you do that? Probably
no,
not because it seems like it's just
you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater,
yeah,
right? What you
you're
can
taking away
do,
the nostalgia and the heritage.
yeah, but you can strengthen those assets, right? So the Walmart, right? That was done by one of my previous agencies, very good at like they're awesome at that kind of work, right? So, they did Budweiser, they did, various other redesigns. That's where I did Pringles. But with the Walmart element is like, as you say, like it's not really like you see all these comments on, oh wow, what do they actually do? That's the most
Yeah,
expensive reaper.
so talk to me about that because that's
Yeah.
the interesting point, like, people are like, "I'd pay $1,000,000 to, like, thicken the font."
But they're not paying just to do that.
That's what I want. Yeah,
That's the
what is the process behind
So
that?
that's the refining of the distinctive brand assets, right? To thicken the font, to make the spark or the sun. I don't know what it's called, what it's called, but to strengthen that is to make it fit for purpose, right? So we're in a digital world right now. Like if you've got something that is a little bit bolder, you can use it. Sorry, you can use it at
Yeah,
a smaller scale, right? You
mhm,
can use it as a favicon a lot more easier. You can use it in social stuff. But then also craft something that's a bit stronger and has a bit more presence to it, but still is very familiar, you can activate it and do things with it. Now that's where the work really went into with the Walmart redesign, is actually giving everything a reason and a purpose and activating it to keep it fresh and timely and to really kind of engage with consumers.
mm.
Like they're using the brand differently now
So,
than what they were
would an
previously.
example be like, if that sun
Yeah,
was stationary for, hundreds of years because we didn't have
yeah,
digital ways to bring it to life,
yeah.
but now it may,
Now it has movement,
have movement or
but
come up in a circle or
there's a
what
reason it has movement, right? It's not just the sake of making it move. It has movement because of
represents something.
it tells
Yeah,
a story or
yeah,
it builds a connection. And like so much today, like one of the things I always talk to my clients about, either side, big brands, small brands, is people are buying into you before they buy you in a way of like people fall in love with brands or have connections with brands before they actually then go to the store and buy it. A lot of it now is I go into the store and I know what I'm looking for. Like Goodles, right? Go into the store because my social and is flooded by it. I kind of like the art direction, all that
yeah,
kind of stuff. Now, look, that's look me looking at it from a creative standpoint, but it's about building a connection. So even the way they talk and they behave, they're appealing to certain people, and they're already kind of in love with the brand, or want to be in love with the brand, or want to be a part of the brand or a part of what it's saying. And then, the they're, as I say, they're then going into store and buying the brand
Yeah.
itself as well. So you have to always think about who your consumer is, why they're your consumer. And sometimes you can have a pretty focused consumer, or you can have a pretty wide consumer,
Yeah.
like we were talking about earlier on, right? If I've got Oreo cookies, my consumer can flex from a 4-year-old kid to an 8-year-old grandma,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Fundamentally, that's a wide consumer space. Whereas, I've got something that is a little bit more focused on Gen Z, for example, then the brand talks and behaves differently. But what's clever about Oreo is
Yeah.
it could talk to all of those demographics.
Yeah.
Right? It does. It resonates, and it might resonate differently to an 8-year-old than a 5-year-old, right? An 8-year-old just buys it because they've probably always bought it. They love it. It's a quality for them. It's a quality product that they know what they're getting, and they love the brand.
Yeah.
And that they've probably had the old kind of advertising and the things over the years that have build that brand love with them. But we have to be so much more reactive today than what we were 10, 15, 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
You know well, I can remember when I first came to the US, I was 19 years of age, and all my buddies back home were like, bring me back a X, Y, and Z bar, right? Because
They don't have
whoa,
it.
you're going to America, that's fucking cool, like bring me back these cool candy
Yeah.
brands. That doesn't happen anymore because I can go in when
It's
I'm in.
so funny, by the way, an anecdote on that. My parents still, when they go back to India, bring an extra like have an extra
Yeah,
suitcase
yeah,
packed with shit from America. I'm like,
yeah.
they
They
have
have
that
that there.
available.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
you don't need to do
I'll
what
go
you did 20 and pack it.
I'll
They'll
get
literally always check. I'm like, what's this extra bag? Well, they're like, we want to bring stuff to our like
yeah.
nephews and nieces and whatever. And I'm like,
Well,
dude,
they
they
can
have
get
this shit.
they
Yeah,
have that shit.
they
They
have
can go to
Oreos now.
that
We're good.
yeah, they can go
Yeah,
to the store. And like that the example of that is I went home, I don't know, like 4 months ago, right? A big soccer fan, did a couple of crazy trips, red eyes on a Friday, land, go to the game and come back here. And my buddy was like, "Hey, can you pick me up this prime drink and this prime drink and this prime drink and bring it back for my kids?" I was like, "Yeah, okay." I said, "But I'm like, I'm gonna have to check a bag now,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
But I'll do it because they're young kids and they collect these prime bottles for
yeah,
for whatever reason." I land at Heathrow and I get off the plane, and there they are in the fucking Boots chemist on the shelf, and I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
"Dude, you've just made this trip a lot more painful for me,
Yeah.
and it's here."
That's so
Like,
funny.
and fair enough, right? It might just be that the size of the bottle is different
They
because
wanted the one that everyone's hype about on social media, whatever, yeah,
but the
that
point I'm trying to make, right, is that there's this and this really is talking to global brands, right? Is that a lot of the work that I've done over the last 10 years with global brands is actually tighten them up globally and make them more consistent, right? Because you could have a Belvita cookie show up differently in France in lots of different ways than what you could in the US 10 years ago because to be honest, people didn't really kind of use social. They didn't see what the brand was doing.
mhm,
Brands weren't behaving the way they are today. So a big project I did with them was looking at because Belvita cookie, for example, has a different occasion and a different meaning in France than what it does here in the US. Right? It was brought into the US as a whoa, I can have a cookie for breakfast and it's healthy.
yeah, yeah,
Whereas in Europe, it was very much of a breakfast cookie, and it the way that it showed up, the occasion, the usage was different. Now it still is,
yep,
but the brand is connected now. Like the distinctive brand assets are the same, and they activate in a majority of the same ways, but have the flexibility to activate slightly different, but in a consistent look and feel to tell different stories in
yeah,
different markets. Because as a brand, as I say, like I could go on to the Belvita US social post right now in Europe and be like, What's that? That looks different." Not that that's a bad thing, but it's really about us making sure that the brand strength has strength globally, especially when you're on that scale, that it becomes something that people know, they're familiar with, they recognize.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
It's and thanks for double clicking on
that's
the
right.
mass global brands because I think that's interesting probably in terms of even that Walmart example and kind of stringing it along to what you just said.
Mm,
There's so many iterations when you go global and when you've been around for 100 plus years for some of these brands,
yeah,
transitioning to more of a startup, high growth direct to consumer company. You guys now work with a lot of those types of brands.
yeah, yeah,
How is that landscape shifting as well? And the only other color I'd add
yeah,
is I think my personal viewpoint is that there was this brief era of everything starting to look the same,
yeah,
like D2C brands, and I think
yeah,
so after this whole Warby Parker, Casper,
yeah.
Allbirds kickoff like 10 years ago, they've melded together in a very similar way, and I think now brands are redefining, trying to break away from that, like, you just look like any other direct to consumer brand.
100%. Right.
And
So I'll give you an
yeah,
example of the latest project that we've just done at Interact, which is Groons, which
a
is,
client of ours too, yeah,
yeah,
great
right.
business, yeah.
So DTC, very successful DTC. Now, with direct to consumer, your packaging and your brand doesn't need to work as hard as what it does when you're in retail and or beyond DTC, because you can use the website that it's on, other elements to tell the story, to tell what the product is. Like if you look at Groons where it was before we got hold of it, right? The unique thing about Groons is that they have a bear-shaped green candy that actually tastes really good. Now, in their previous packaging, before, and the reason they came to us was, hey, Target would like us to go into retail. We need to change our packaging because they didn't need to have all of the information and the immediacy and the connection to consumers when you're on DTC because you've already got them. You know what I mean? You're not trying to sell them something. You're on their website or
Yeah,
you're on their social. So with Groons, it was like let's step back and what does make us unique? And fundamentally, we're a great Groons is a great gummy brand that
mhm,
delivers green products
nutrition,
in in
yeah,
in, in in a in a very tasty way, but also it's shaped like a bear. That didn't even communicate on their existing packaging, for example, or a lot of their brand. So Barry is, as he's called, a big part of the work that we did
Barry the
was
bear, yeah,
Barry the Bear was actually we need to actually connect with consumers in retail and beyond DTC, and we need to build an emotional connection. We need to feel our own personality, our own, you know, um,
it's like Mr. P,
our own
yeah,
vibe, right? Whereas they looked like AG1 before because probably they saw AG1 and saw the success of AG1. Were like, well, that's cool. Just a nice clean Helvetica typeface on a green bag. Even the green bag was almost the same. We're like, you're different than that. You have so much personality, and where you are today, that is not being delivered. Now, if you look at what the work that we've done, not only did we, you know, really, to be honest, a big thing that we did is this beyond strengthened. Like it was a big redesign. Like there was, Groons was done in like a Helvetica typeface, and so we redid the brand mark. It's
yeah,
a gummy texture, so there's a lovely kind of almost like the product feel to the brand mark itself. We created a ownable typeface that only Groons has and owns. So now anytime that Groons talks, it uses that typeface, so it's ownable to them. And then we elevated the product difference that makes them different, which is the the green bear, Barry,
yeah,
right? And so now we turned him into a mascot. We also elevated that product depiction on front of pack because that is very important. People need to know what they're buying in retail. They don't need to see that on DTC. And a good example of that is like another brand, which is Behave, for example, candy brand, right? When they first launched and on DTC and then in store, there was no product photography on the front of
mhm,
pack. If you look today, there is. And
yeah,
this is the same for a lot of other brands, is because actually people want to know what's inside or what they're putting
yeah,
into their mouth. And so What we did with Groons was show the product. We connected it. We told a story with it. We owned a color palette. So there's like five, and that's quite a lot because I always say you only need probably between 2 and 4 distinctive brand assets and just use them in a really
Yeah.
strong way. We have an ownable color palette, now an ownable typeface, an ownable brand mark, and we've elevated the product depiction, right? So actually that's 4, right? So that's 4 distinctive assets. Now, the shape and form is an asset. If you think about it, Coca-Cola, for example, right? The glass bottle is an iconic asset. Now that's just a structure, and that was used in a way of that was how the product was first launched, and it is now in its form that you can draw a silhouette of it, and people will know that that's the Coca-Cola
Mhm.
bottle. Same with Absolute Vodka, for example, but it's how they're using that is why people are familiar with it. So a lot of the work we're doing with Groons now because of being, as Chad would say is like, they're still a pretty new brand and a founder led brand, and it's very much working with them, right? We haven't just done Groons now. See you later. It's doing great. Like
Yeah.
I think
We
the
we
work.
manage them today, and that rebrand has helped tremendously.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like we were at Expo West, for example, and everyone was like, "Have you seen the Groons work?" I was like, "Yeah, that's what we've just done out of the studio. That's great work." But we're still working with them. They've got other things coming down the line, and we're helping shape the brand uh, as creative thought leaders and partners versus a design agency that's just being asked to create some design work
Yeah.
for them. And helping them. And they're building an awesome team, for example, that all gelling together now to help grow this successful brand that is, knock on wood, continuing to grow. And
Yeah, and it's so interesting you mentioned, the visualization of the product on the package, and
mm,
yes, I think you also mentioned another great point, which is the brand does not have to work as hard on D2C because you have the embellishment of a description, a
yeah,
story, pictures, assets
hmm
on a website that kind of help you contextualize the package and the brand,
well, you
which is immediately removed when you go to retail. But you mentioned visualization, and I think that's really funny too. Last night I was at my hotel and I had, you know how they have like the bar snacks,
yeah,
hotel bar
yeah,
snacks, and I realized because it had a window, like one of these snacks, it said dried mangoes or whatever on it,
yeah.
right? But there was a window on it where I could actually see
See,
it.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I don't, if I hadn't seen the dried mangoes visually,
yeah,
I don't think I would have opened that box.
yeah,
But it just, like the conversion was immediately there because you relate to the actual product. And there's so many products that have launched on D2C that, Haya is a good example.
yeah,
Another brand that we love.
yeah,
That they're thinking about how do you redesign because the packaging is just a bright yellow or bright blue,
yeah,
just with the brand name,
yeah. Because
and
to
no
your
depiction of what the kid is actually gonna get out of it. Is it gonna be a chewable? Is it a gummy? Is it a bear?
yeah,
I don't know, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
And to your point,
yeah.
like you have people on a DTC platform for as long as you want. In store, you don't. You have,
Yeah, it's
like,
the
a
6
couple
seconds,
of
whatever,
like,
yeah.
literally and then you have the 10, 5, 1 is what you say, like 10 foot, 5, 1. So it's like 10, find my brand, 5, what product do I want from that brand, and 1, seal the deal and pick it up and take it home. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, y you know, like I said earlier on, right, there a lot of people are going into store now knowing what brands they're looking for. But still some aren't, right? And you have to stand out and you have to be easily identifiable in a very, very quick manner.
Yeah,
And to your point on the mango strips in the hotel room, like beyond the hotel room itself, things are expensive these days. Like people don't want to drop $12 on some dried mango if they don't know what they're
yeah,
getting,
yeah,
right? And you saw it and you're like, probably made it more like, okay, yeah, that looks good. I'm going to buy
yeah.
that. Whereas if you're like, hey, this is a $10 bag of candy, and you're like, well, looks kind of cool, but
I don't know what I'm getting. Yeah,
and then I buy it and I'm like, well, this is shit. Do you
yeah,
know what I mean? It's like people are willing to pay for something if it's, they get something out of it,
yeah,
right? People like things are expensive, but people will like make sacrifices in other areas to buy something that they
yeah.
love. And,
What are some other unique, like, so see-through packaging or
yeah,
visualizing the packaging,
yeah,
or not the visualizing the product
yeah,
is one way.
yeah,
Talk to me about any other innovative ways people are redesigning or branding or packaging.
yeah,
The only thing that comes to mind, and would also want your opinion to that on that, is like more of the I think Dr. Squatch did it. Like you can
yeah.
sniff the bar
Yes.
through the
Yeah, yeah.
packaging.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
thought that was unique,
yeah.
where you don't have
Yeah,
to wait to open it to smell it,
yeah,
or like you're not the guy in the deodorant section like popping them off and sniffing them because everyone does that.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so like, is it just easier to just put it to
I
your
don't do
nose? Yeah, yeah.
that, but
But you no, it's seriously, it's like you're
yeah,
gonna have to, like, I see people all the time. It's like
yeah,
it's a new scent like sandalwood or whatever, and you're like, "Oh, I wonder how this stuff."
yeah, yeah.
So is it just more convenient? You have, to your point, 10-5-1.
Yeah, yeah,
This takes less time than me fucking unscrewing it and
yeah.
like
Yeah, and I
do
think it is very connected to the product itself, right? Because to your point, if we're talking about Dr. Squatch and a bar of soap, then yeah, or deodorant, you're buying for the smell that you like, right? Or the experience. So you need to be able to smell it. So to your point, if there's a very accessible point that you can deliver that scent, then that works. I think another interesting way people are, telling the product story is through tone of voice, and copywriting, and actually being very succinct and being very clear, and building that connection very immediately to the product itself. Because there are going to be situations where you can't show the product, or you can't have a window because it's light sensitive or whatever. So you have to step back and be like, right, okay, I just need the game here is to communicate as quick as I can to a consumer what I am and why you should buy me, or why am I different from the other brand sitting next to me on the left hand side.
mm,
So that can be many different things. That can be point of difference, i.e., this is got 19 grams of protein in it, whereas the bar sitting next to it has 7. If I'm a protein eater, I'm going to pick up the 19. So, a lot of the work we do is talk to our brands about what really sets you apart from everyone else. Because every brand that we work on will want to put every claim in the world on the front of pack because they think that's the thing to do. If you do that, it doesn't actually work for you, because people are just like, whoa, what is going on here? Like, if you lead with a protein call out, for example, and you have all these other benefits, that's also a way of people knowing what they're buying. So what I'm trying to say is that I think it's doesn't just have to be visual in a way of showing product or smelling product, or uh, gummy form or shape or whatever it might be, but the way that you deliver the information and you tell it in an immediate and connective way is really important
mm,
as well. Because people are looking for things. We all eat different diets, we all do different things, and there's something that I'm going to want out of a chocolate bar that is probably different to what you want to get out of a chocolate
yeah,
bar, and we probably will buy two different brands of chocolate bar because of that.
yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah. It's really interesting. What are three big missteps to watch out for as a newer direct to consumer founder that may not have the budget to go out and hire, an agency right off the bat?
I think the first one being just really be clear and be aligned and grounded in the product that you are creating. Like, be hypersensitive to, is there anything else out there that is anywhere near similar to what I'm doing?
Mm,
Why am I doing this? What sets me apart from anyone else? So for me, that's like the foundations of a brand. Now, we help a lot of brands, as I say, we have someone come to us and go, I've got a great idea for an energy drink. Cool. Okay, we're going to help you figure out why this is a good idea and what makes sense, and do your brand foundation. So first one is very much of just really ground yourself in what sets you apart from everyone else, because some brands don't. Some brands don't stay the test of time because they're just another candy brand or another cookie brand, and they'll last for 5 years because they're the new thing, and then they'll go away again. They won't last. And that's a lot of the time because they're not really grounded in a belief or anything that's different than
mm,
than the competitors that are out there. I think the other thing is another big point, and heard on if they haven't got the budget, but people sometimes undervalue the power of brand and branding. Like, it's really important alongside marketing as well, right? So if you create a strong brand and you invest in it, it will grow. Like it's a big investment for especially a startup to drop X amount of tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars on working with a creative agency to design and build their brand. But it does give you the armory, it gives you everything you need to go out in the world. Let's use Poppy, for example, right? They weren't called Poppy when they launched. That was Mother
Mhm.
apple cider drinks,
Yep.
right? And they had a great product, and the product did very well. And they were like, "Shit, we've got a great product, but we don't have a brand."
Yeah.
Right? So they did well, fortunately, for a few years off the back of a really good product. Then they had to create a brand.
Yep.
And now they've created a brand, and now they've just sold for billions of dollars to Pepsi. Like, that's the power of branding. That is the power of it. And I think so much today, it's it's a hard thing sometimes saying like getting someone to let go of $100,000 to have someone create a brand. It will pay off. It
Yeah.
will. And
So the
like,
misstep there is not focusing on brand.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I think some people just think that they can just go to a freelancer and they create a piece of packaging for them. And that's the other thing. Like, it's easy to create a piece of packaging, but a piece of packaging isn't a brand.
Yeah.
Like, that's just one part of a brand is the packaging. The brand is everything else. It's all of the assets that I was talking about earlier on. It's the storytelling, it's the emotional value, it's the differentiation, the connection, it's the relevancy.
Mhm.
Um, and some people will just say, right, actually, that's not. I can't afford to do that. I'm going to
Yeah.
go and have someone. And I would say probably 90% of the time, about 6 months later, "What's up?
Yeah.
That didn't go too well.
Yeah.
Can you help us out?" And that is a like, I think people undervalue the power of brands. Now,
Yeah.
you know, there are brands that bomb and, you mentioned this earlier on, like, there's a lot of, conversation around rebrands, for example. I think sometimes people rebrand, especially the larger brands, because either they get a new creative director in at the brand, or they get a new CEO or a new CMO or a new leader, and they want to make their mark on something. Fair enough. And sometimes they don't do it for a rhyme or a purpose. Like I'm still trying to get to grips with what that Jaguar rebrand
Yeah.
was all about, to be honest. I would have gone the other way. I'd have just strengthened the assets that they
Yeah.
had and
Yeah.
activated them in a more relevant
I think
way,
most people would've, yeah,
right?
even me who's
Yeah.
not in the
I
world,
mean,
it's
what
just
what
kinda
the fuck
natural.
was that? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
like, look, I'm not talking ill of other creative agencies, but because it's not with them, right? A lot of the time you'll be like,
You're
"What?"
following the direction of, yeah, the internal narrative.
Creatives don't get to do whatever they want,
Yeah.
right? That's not how it works. It's not like, "Oh, I'm gonna go to a creative agency, and then we're gonna create something, and there you go." There's something that happens along that process, which is the client, right? And I am sure that there was a lot led on the Jaguar redesign from the client side, n less of the creative.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the creative team put that in front of the client. I don't think it started like that.
Mm-mm.
I don't think that was the original concept, right, or the
Yeah.
original thought. So, that's some of the things of in our industry when you see all of this, like, "This is shit. This is not great. What the hell have they done here?" It's like, you have to understand everything around that. There's a reason sometimes why
Yeah.
people make these changes, and
And it's just so, man, you just highlighted such an obvious fact, which is that's why these companies are called brands,
yeah,
and then you forget to focus on the brand.
yep,
Like, this whole concept of for, like, every single CPG product we're talking about is, our industry calls them brands. Like,
yeah,
when you go to Target, you're bringing your brand to the retailer.
yeah,
And there's companies that wanna do that without ever having touched that department of their business, which is, brand building. And I love what you said because we align the same way in the work we do, which is we don't wanna take on products that just wanna get to the shelf.
no,
We wanna take on the brands, and we will turn away more brands or products that haven't worked on their
yeah,
brand
yeah,
because they're gonna have an expectation that, "Hey, when we get to Walmart, Target, Costco, Whole Foods, wherever, that these retailers are gonna do the work to connect with the consumer, which is not the case. Because if you step into the consumer's shoe and you're walking through a Whole Foods or
Yeah,
a Target or a Walmart,
yeah.
you're not, just finding new brands on you're gravitating towards the ones that either have built brands, are showcasing their branding or emotionality, or that you've heard in the ether, of community and, social media and word of mouth and all of these other, influence
Mhm.
points that, "Wow, this is the brand I wanna take." Poppy, for example.
Yeah.
That's the one I wanna drink.
I mean, it's
It's
interesting, right? Because the buyers today, and when I say buyers, Target, for example, they're looking for certain things. They haven't ended up where they are today out of luck, right? They had an awesome creative lead, they had an awesome vision. Now, like, that's where Walmart, for me, Walmart is trying to now become Target. And a lot of this is down to buying, like buyers buying brands for their store. And they're very critical.
yeah,
Like, I've worked on brands and they've come to us and like, Target like the product, but they won't take us because we don't have a brand. Like, we just did a redesign for Egg Life, which is
yeah,
uh
we're familiar.
yeah,
Yeah,
is an egg-based, better for you product, right? Started off with wraps. You'll see them in bodegas in New York, you'll see them in stores. They don't they came to us because they didn't have a brand, but they had this great opportunity to get into these
distribution points,
distribution
yeah,
points,
yeah,
and the feedback was, "You guys need to create a brand," and
yeah,
that's what we did for them. And, the redesign was launched at Expo West, and the target buyers were at the stall and they were like, "Oh my god, this is like, this is great. This is exactly what we need now. We can have that in our store,
yep,
you know, night and day." They were
yep,
like this, but people would who've been buying it will still know it's their product. Do you know what I mean? There's
mhm,
things that we retained from it that people will existing consumers won't be confused. They'll know that it's their brand that they've been buying. But what this is going to do is it's going to bring in new consumers. It's also going to help them with innovation, because that's another big challenge when you have a brand that maybe has different product forms or experiences that travels around the store, right? So with this, for example, they're going to go beyond wraps and they're going to go into on the go eating. So they're going to have something that's in the deli wrap aisle, right, chilled section. Then they're going to have something as you're going to the checkout, right, and you need
that
to have
brand
a thread,
consistency,
right, where
yeah,
you're like, I love those wraps. Oh my fucking god, they do to go stuff now. I'm going to buy that.
mm,
That is the power of a brand, is just having that familiarity and that recognition and that memory structure alongside a great a great
yeah,
product, and that's the thing. You can't be successful on just a great product. You have to be a great brand.
yeah.
That's
And I think you've laid that out, beautifully. I think both on the mass side, meaning conglomerate brands and rebranding and evolving those, and then
mm,
you have these founder-led businesses that are just so excited to get their first consumer and build a brand for that, and then everything in between. You guys work on a myriad of different
yeah,
projects consistently. I always love going a little bit introspective in on these
yeah, yeah.
conversations too. Like, where are you drawing all of your inspiration from as you kind of embody that and then, reflect it onto the brands you work with?
I would say with Interact, out of all of the agencies I've worked for over the last 20 years, we are so ingrained in our industry, like, right up to the founder, right on the floor, talking to brands, talking to investors, but not falsely, with love and with passion, and lives the industry, right? So already we're ingrained in that way. But then my team also love the industry. We are fucking awesome at CPG, brand led CPG. We are great at. There's nothing wrong with owning that, right? Because of how we're ingrained in it. We have the team. They go out. They're inspired by things beyond. I don't like them sitting in front of blogs and just pull and swipe, because, to your point,
Yeah,
that's how everything ends up looking the
the same.
same anyway. And that's why it goes back to what I was saying earlier on. Is like, Like, how can we look at things a little bit differently? Like, how can we solve this problem? What is the idea? How can we solve this a bit? Is there inspiration we can take from a different category, or not even a category? Is it inspiration from fashion, and how do we bring that into, I don't know, a pasta brand
Yeah.
randomly? Like, what can I borrow from that? So I think it's about really keeping fresh and relevant, but also just loving what, like, being in and ingrained into this industry. Like, I've met so many people in the last year that, and like being on the ground at Expo, it was a whole new experience to me, in a way of like, people were actually engaging with myself and Blake and the other members of the team in a way of, they just wanted to chat, right? They just wanted to talk about branding, the world it is today, like how we find the stuff, challenges that they're having. So I think it's really about building
Mm.
relationships. I think are really important, but genuine relationships. I think there's a lot of transactional, less general relationships out there. I will say that our passion is almost an investment from our side. Like, there's nothing more rewarding than working on um, either a global redesign or a
Just
new
seeing it
brand,
come to life.
seeing it come to life and being successful, like being effective and getting a phone call or, something from the client being like, guys, thank you so much. Now I know why we needed to do that. That was awesome. So the Interact has such a passion and a love and affiliation with our industry that gets us ahead, even in just knowing what's out there and what's going on. Like, we have a great knowledge, we have a great resource, we have an awesome strategy team, we have a great creative team, we have an awesome account team. But we're all passionate, right? It's not just about the creative side. Do you know what I mean? A lot of
Yeah.
time, it's always about the creative team. This is not the case. This is about Interact. This is about our creative studio, our brand agency, and everyone that works there across all departments loves branding and knows about it. And I have a account manager, for example, that literally on her LinkedIn is like CPG fanatic, right? And is out there in her own
Yeah.
time doing stuff, looking at stuff. I don't ask her to do that.
Yeah.
She does it because she loves it. Like, and I
It
think
means so much.
that passion
Yeah.
comes all the way down from Blake into everyone else. And now, as we move forward into the next era and the next years, it's like we need to keep that,
Mm.
right? Because that is what sets us apart from a lot of other agencies out there. And as I say, it's really about these connections, these relationships beyond just the clients themselves. Like, people it's this industry is quite incestuous, right? I think you can, like, from especially from a creative side, I think you can connect everyone by one person. Not far off from the brand side as
Yeah.
well, right? You know this,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Everyone moves in circles.
Yeah.
And to be a part of that is very awesome, to be
Yeah.
honest, right?
Yeah.
To be having conversations with someone like yourself, right? That
Yeah. I love that. Our team stays so curious. I mean, that's
yeah,
one of the
yeah,
fundamental things that
yeah.
work for us, which comes out of love and passion. But
Mhm.
we have people that aren't even external facing that, I probably, even during this podcast, I've probably
Yeah,
gotten 4 or 5 slacks around like some interns sending me new brands that they've seen on the street or
yeah,
that they saw that was highly popular on TikTok, and just that where nothing to do with their role,
yeah, yeah,
right? Nothing to do with their
yeah,
job description or title, but
yeah,
they're sending me shit all day, right?
yeah,
And I think that to me is a real telling tale of not only, the business you guys are running,
yeah.
and the passion that you let spread through the organization, but also that you're just hiring people who care a ton, and that
100%.
makes all the difference
Yeah.
in an engagement.
You're building a team, right? That's the thing, is like, this is a team. This is not about individuals. This is
Yeah.
about us all achieving greatness together, and being part of something
Hmm.
awesome whilst really enjoying it.
Yeah.
Right? That I didn't do this job because I wanted to earn shitloads of money. Like, if I wanted to do that, I probably would have worked a little bit harder at school and tried to
Yeah.
become an accountant. Right? I
Yeah.
absolutely failed at school, and
Yeah.
I didn't even know I could do this job and get paid for it until my art teacher was like, you can do graphic design. I told my dad that, and my dad was
Was it
like,
the first thing you did out of
yeah, well,
graphic design?
I wanted to be a policeman like my dad, and he was like, "There is no way you're being a policeman." So I was
Yeah.
like, "Dad, I'm pretty fucked. Go read my school reports." I don't really have any other options.
Yeah.
Like, I flunked every class except for art, I got an A in, and then my art tutor was like, "Hey, you can go study graphic design." I went home to my dad and was like, "I'm gonna go study graphic design." He went, "No, you're fucking not gonna study that. There's no
Yeah.
money in that. There's no
Yeah.
money in that."
He's like, "Be a
And
policeman."
yeah, 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 now go
Okay.
back to that.
Yeah.
But I did that, right? And, I did that because that was my passion.
Yeah.
And that's been my passion for 20 years. And my biggest reward is taking all of my learnings and imbuing that passion in others as well. And I feel like would have failed if I don't be a part of making people better, more successful, more talented than what
Mm.
I am. That's a failure. Like my brother, is 3 years younger than me. He has his own creative agency in the UK. And part of that for me was like he literally was followed me through the same art school. And he looked to me of like I was ahead of him and I shared my learnings with him. Now, I he will be embarrassed if I say this, but he's more successful than I am.
Yeah.
But I love that.
Yeah.
Like he started his own business like 10 years ago. I don't have my own business. I'm in partner like working with Blake and the team, but he had a very successful business. Like he's won various awards, got extreme exposure. And, that's down to just kind of not just hard work and determination, but it's just about kind of having a connection and a conversation with other people in the industry, i.e., myself. He never, he always worked at an agency. He never had any really that much client interaction when he was at this other agency. When you're at bigger agencies and you're a senior designer,
Yeah.
how many times do you get to talk to a client, right? Not a lot. And, he wanted to try something. And so I did have that experience. So that's what I kind of shared with him. I was like, this is how you kind of engage with clients. This is how you
Yeah.
go and find new business, all that kind of stuff. But, yeah, I mean, one of the things someone always says to me into like what inspires you in the team is stay naive. I think that is,
Yeah. Stay curious.
yeah,
Stay naive.
stay naive. Like, don't think you know everything. Because if you do, I'm a bit of a dick, to be honest. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, let's be real and just be like, I'm always learning.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting here as an executive creative director at Interact being like, right, I've done it. Here I am. I know everything. Like, I've got an intern joining us now. Like, he's sharing stuff with me where I'm like, this is great.
Well,
And
that vulnerability just bodes connection too, right?
yes,
Like with the client as well. I mean,
yeah,
we're all in the service business here, at least in this conversation, and
yeah,
it's it is something that I always try to embody in all my conversations too with platform is it's such a collaborative conversation with our brands and founders. And I don't pretend to know everything. I learned retail for the first time 5 6 years ago. I came from the D2C world, right?
yeah,
And so, but learning together sometimes is more effective than someone just telling you what to do.
yeah. And
B-
like, go back to the other point of like, it's not just with the creative team to come up with ideas. Everyone can have an idea. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, we've been in brainstorms and meetings with members of the account team, members of even the financial MD members. People all have ideas. And it's about actually embracing those and shaping them. Now, they might have a start of an idea, and there's no wrong ideas, but like everyone can contribute. And I
Yeah,
think that's creating an atmosphere where everyone feels like they can say something and have a voice within reason
yeah.
is awesome.
You mentioned some great points there too. That one of the more like going into some final
Yeah,
questions here for you. I think one stands out to me that I haven't yet talked about at all. I think even on the show, which is we talk about external branding a lot,
yeah,
how it shows up to the end consumer, how it just shows up to all your constituents, stakeholders, etc. How important is it? And if it is important, how do you effectively, strategize around this to have your brand communicate internally,
yeah,
to then let the rest of the organization and the team embody that brand and speak to it? I think this is a little bit more important in the service businesses that
yeah,
we live in
yeah,
because everyone is selling to a degree, whoever meets a
yeah,
brand or a client. But generally speaking, internal comms around a brand.
yeah.
How important is that, and how do you effectively
I
push
think
that
it's
through?
extremely important. I think if you don't have everyone believing in what you're doing and being a part of something, it's never going to be as successful if you do have that, right? And that's the same for for Interact as it is for the Mondelez Oreo team. You know, that they're in the brand. They're behind the brand. They
Mhm.
love the brand. They know the brand. They get excited
And
about
every
the
all
brand.
the pieces of work that they touch within the brand is gonna come from their belief
Yes.
or lack thereof
Yeah.
in the brand.
Yeah. You need to be in it. You need to be behind it. You need to believe in it. And, that's where, whether you're building a brand or you're working in an agency, those people stand out that aren't. And it's like you have to create an environment that people feel like they can be themselves, they can be open, they can have a conversation, they can share thoughts, they can share problems because that's a team. That's about building a brand, an internal brand is actually creating like almost like a safe space, but also a very empowering space as well. Like, you know, one of my big things, my dad told me this. He was like, "There's nothing wrong with delegation and empowerment, because actually, it really helps elevate your team." Like I go out my way to give more empowerment or more delegation to other members of my team to help them grow.
Yeah.
Then it helps me
The hurdle
because
for a lot of people is losing control.
yeah, but
So,
but you can still have control. You can still direct,
yeah.
right? You can still manage that. But I think it's like that then gives me the time, right? Now that I've delegated something and empowered someone, I've got time now to think differently about another big project that's coming in or be able to look at the business and to see, where I see opportunities of growth or new business like that's my role as well is that I'm more than just being involved in the creative side. It's what we were saying earlier on. It's about building these
Mm,
relationships in a genuine and authentic way. So to your question, like it's very important to have a brand intern. You do not mean a brand belief internally because that's where you're going to get the best. And like, let's have a good time. Do you know
yeah.
what I mean? Like it, especially as I say in the design industry. Like we're not there for any other reason than passion.
Yeah.
We have a
So
passion.
embody it.
Yeah,
Yeah. I love
yeah.
that. A question I like to end a lot of the shows on is this concept of magnetism
Mhm,
and what you're drawn to, what different brands are drawn to. So if you were to pick two or three character traits that
mm,
you're really drawn to, and it doesn't have to be in CPG, by
mhm,
the way, like it could be restaurants, hotels, whatever.
yeah,
What are the 2 to 3 things that really draw you to a brand that have that gravitational pull?
yep. I'm very much around minimalism in a way of like, I think you can still build a lot of emotion and connection for a brand without being all singing and all dancing. Like I'm a little bit of an OCD person and love of
Yeah,
architecture and all that kind of stuff. So minimalism, simplicity is big for me, I think. And then just kind of clarity in the way of like understanding, knowing what it is I'm going back to earlier, I'm either buying or buying into, to your point, beyond CPG brands, but whether that's fashion or other things like that. Relevant
mhm,
relevancy and freshness, I think, something that excites me. Like,
yeah,
"Ooh, fuck, that looks kinda cool," or like, "Oh, and it doesn't just look cool, but there's a reason why it looks cool," and, there's almost this collectability to things as well. Like, I think there's something, really nice around when you have a brand that activates consistently in a true way to its brand, but, like, that's what excites me when I say, like, that's awesome, like, and that's one thing that I have no problem in doing is if someone does a great piece of work that isn't at our agency, I have no problem to say, like, "That is an awesome piece of work," and
yeah,
so you should,
yeah.
right? It's not
There's
about
enough to go around. Yeah,
well, yeah, and like fundamentally, we're all in the same boat, and I don't think there's anything wrong with appreciation of other great work out
yeah,
there, and learn from it.
yeah,
Like, why is it great? And share that with your team. Is like this is a great example because of X, Y, and Z. Like, so I think yeah, simplicity, clarity, excitement.
Yeah.
Just a like, do you know what I mean? Finding a brand that I'm like, "Ooh, I wanna know what they're gonna do next," you know?
Yeah.
Like, this is cool,
Yeah.
like and brands that activate, um, in a really kind of true way to who they are, like, an example, right, of
They did a
Flamin'
swimwear
Hot.
line
They did
with,
a
I think it was
swimwear
Forever
line with,
21.
I think it was Forever
And because there's a
21.
play on the
And because it was a play
Flamin'
on the
Hot, right? So
Yeah.
they had all
Flamin'
these
Hot,
swimsuits
right?
and
So
stuff.
they had all
They
these
then did a
swimsuits and stuff.
collab with
They then did a
KFC because
collab
they're the
with
Zinger Burger
KFC
and they
because they're
used
the
the
Zinger
Flamin'
Burger
Hot
and they
dust
used the
on that.
Flamin' Hot dust
That's
on
all
that.
relevant to
That's
their
all
core
relevant
purpose on
to
what they
their
Mhm.
do,
core
and
purpose
they're
on what they are as a
activating it
brand, but they're
in a really
activating
relevant
it
way.
in
Yeah.
a really relevant way,
Really
and
exciting.
Yeah,
that's
that's a
what's
great character
exciting.
trait that I don't hear
Yeah.
more often, but it's the relevance, which is awesome.
Relevancy is
Yeah.
Yeah.
important.
Relevancy
Like,
is so important.
relevancy
Like,
isn't just about trends
relevancy
and
isn't just
about
about
like what's
trends and
happening
about like what's
today.
happening
It's about
today. It's
building a
about
connection beyond that
building a connection
in a
beyond
way
that
that is
in a way that
purposeful
is
to that
Yeah, and
brand.
contextualized for
purposeful
the
to that
You can
consumer.
brand.
go out and do
Because everyone can go
a
out and do
collab.
a
Like there's
collab.
whole memes
Like
about
there's
like
this whole
crazy
memes about
collabs. Do you
like
know what I mean?
crazy
Like just for
collabs.
the
Do you know what I
sake
mean?
of it.
Like just
Yeah.
for the sake of it.
Why?
There
Yeah.
needs to
There has to
be
be
a
there
genuine
needs to
Yeah,
reason
yeah.
be
why
a genuine
people do
reason
Yeah.
why
I love
people
that,
do
man, and
that.
your passion is so, clear and present that I think Blake and the Interact team are so lucky to have you, and I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
this conversation, man.
Yeah, it's been great.
Such great insights.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
been
thank you,
great.
brother. I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lovely. Thank you.
Thank you,
Cheers,
bro.
man. This was great.
Yeah.